Get ready to level up your Toad game. Matt Fan is about to guide you through the importance and the process of upgrading your Toad software. This session is designed to empower you to keep your tools sharp and your workflows seamless. Whether you're eager to explore new features or simply want to ensure your environment runs at peak performance, Matt will walk you through practical tips and insider insights to make upgrading an easy, stress-free process. This isn't just about software updates, it's about future-proofing your skills and staying ahead in a rapidly evolving data world. Come prepared to learn, ask questions, and leave ready to upgrade with confidence. And with that, I'll turn things over to our expert.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Another great day here. So, my name is Matthew Fan. I'm a solutions consultant here at Quest. I specialize in many of our database solutions, but in particular, I specialize in our Toad database solutions. This is episode 3 of our Toad 101 series. Today's topic is the importance of upgrading and updating your Toad, and also the process of upgrading and updating your Toad. So, what I do is I talk to our millions of Toad users around the world. And I find that far too many times they are running an older or outdated version of Toad. And that could be a Toad for Oracle, a Toad for SQL Server, a Toad for DB2, and so on. And that's because Toad is so solid and oftentimes forward compatible with many systems that people will just neglect to update their Toad for years at a time. They think, oh, it's working, so why bother? And that's actually very risky behavior. And so I hope to talk a little bit about that and make upgrading and updating your Toad as easy as possible. I'll also go through an example of updating a Toad on one of my machines. So today we're going to discuss why you should upgrade and update to the newest versions of Toad, why it's important. And really it's two big reasons. One, for security, of course. And two, is to get the latest features, right? So I'll take some time to talk about how to update your Toad and why updating your Toad keeps your Toad secure, which keeps your computer secure, and then that keeps your company and your data secure as well. I'll also highlight some of the newer features of Toad that you might be missing out on. And so I hope to also dispel any myths or concerns about updating your Toad, like it's too hard or it's too complicated. So I hopefully will walk you through that whole process and make it as easy as possible. And again, lastly, we'll go through an example of updating Toad on one of my own machines, and I'll highlight some best practices like backing up your settings, where to go to find your keys, and things like that. All right, let's start with the foundational idea. Security is a collective effort, right? It's not just the job of the IT team or the security team. It's something that everybody, every user, every developer, DBA, we contribute to the security of our company by the choices that we make. And one of those choices is whether or not we keep our tools up to date. And honestly, it's not just with Toad or with your computer at work. Really, everything in your life needs to be updated, right? Your phone has probably a billion apps on it. My car needs software updates as well. And so I wouldn't really want to go driving in my car without updating some of the recommended software updates, right? And so just like that, you don't want to really be running software on your network that's not updated as well. Software is always evolving, and so are all the different threats that we face. And attackers will quickly adapt to those changes and those evolutions, right? And so, what was secure maybe a year ago is probably now open for invitation for hackers and exploitations. And when people hear update, they usually think, oh, new features, right? And yeah, updates bring new features and compatibility, which we'll talk about later, but it also brings something even more important, the security patches, right? That closes the vulnerabilities that you might have. The compliance updates to make sure that you align with standards, and even just performance and UI optimizations to make your product or solution run faster or smoother or less buggy, right? So updating is very important, and security is a big part of that. So let's talk about a few cases in the real world where people fail to update their software and the consequences that happen because of that. And so this one's pretty well known, Equifax, right? One of the 3 major US credit bureaus, and they suffered a breach that exposed the personal data of almost 150 million people. That's about half of the citizens of the United States, right? And people had their data stolen, their social security numbers, their birth dates, their addresses, driver's license numbers, really personal information was exposed. And how it happened was that hackers exploited a vulnerability in Apache Struts, which is an open source framework for building web applications. That vulnerability was publicly disclosed and patched 2 months prior to the hackers gaining access to Equifax's systems. But Equifax failed to apply that patch in a timely manner. So the attackers were inside their network for 76 days, just extracting information unnoticed, right? And this was the largest data breach in history, or at least at that time. It resulted in $700 million in settlement costs, huge reputational damage to their company and their brand, and just public distrust, right? Now, every time I hear Equifax, I think about the security breach. And this totally could have been prevented. All they had to do was apply that security patch and close that back door. And it would have prevented those attackers from being able to exploit the vulnerability and get into their systems. So like any system, you got to make sure that your applications and your applications have been patched and updated as required. All right. Another example was the WannaCry ransomware attack in 2017. And this was a global attack. It was a ransomware attack that affected over 230,000 computers in 150 different countries in just a few days. And what it did was it's a worm that spread across machine to machine. It encrypted the files on the machine, and it demanded a Bitcoin payment in exchange for decrypting your files. And if you didn't pay that extortion, it would delete the files, and your files were permanently lost, right? And so this was a worm that spread because of a known Windows vulnerability in the way computers talk to each other in their SMB server messaging block, right? And so this vulnerability was actually discovered by the NSA, and it was, Microsoft knew about it and started patching it, but information about it got out. So although Microsoft patched this out in March of 2017, 2 months before the worm started to spread, many organizations failed to apply that patch to their Windows operating system. So this affected a ton of organizations, right? The UK's National Health Institute, they had over 70,000 devices affected, and this is a health institution. So surgeries were impacted, emergency care was disrupted, people's lives were in danger because of this outage, right? And also other companies, big companies like FedEx or Renault and Telefonica and Boeing and things like that. So lots of big companies, but even especially small to medium-sized businesses were hit hard because they just didn't have the manpower to keep their Windows operating systems updated and to fix the issue and things like that. So this was a huge issue that spread because people weren't updating their Windows, right? And I'm pretty guilty of this sometimes too, right? I get that little notification that there's an update and you need to restart your computer. I'm like, I'm in the middle of something. I don't really want to update right now. And so I'll ignore it. I'll snooze it. And then a couple days go by and I'm like, oh no, I really got to do that update now, right? So it happens. Your computer, your phone, even cars nowadays need updates. So it gets a little annoying having to apply all these patches all the time. But again, very important that they are applied as soon as possible. Okay, this one's actually kind of interesting because it wasn't because something wasn't updated. It was because something was updated. But hackers were able to access and infiltrate the supply chain of software, right? Hackers were able to get into SolarWinds development processes, and they were able to access their source code for one of their applications called Orion. So the hackers put in a backdoor into their SolarWinds product, and then so when SolarWinds, did their regular updates and stuff like that, they didn't notice that there was this extra piece of code in their application, right? So they signed off on it saying that, it's good to go. And they started to deliver their software update to all their customers, not knowing that there's this hidden backdoor that was installed as part of it. So people just downloaded the software to update, but not knowing that there was a backdoor inside that software because they trusted it came from their vendor, but their vendor had been compromised and they didn't know about it. So all these people were installing software with a backdoor on it, and agencies like the U.S. Federal Department of Treasury and Homeland Security and State Department, big important federal agencies and corporations like Microsoft, they were all infiltrated through this backdoor, right? And once inside, they were able to, access networks and things like that, and they were able to go undetected for months before it was exposed, and people started to apply the fixes and remove this update and close those backdoors and things like that. So even when you have software that looks legitimate, it could have been infiltrated and could have had a Trojan or a backdoor put on it if the supply chain of that vendor application isn't secure, right? So there's just another case study of where, you just got to make sure and be vigilant about all the things you do on your machine. So let's take a look at what goes into making sure that this never happens with Toad, right? So this is using Toad for Oracle as an example, because every release of Toad for Oracle is extremely secure. First, every release goes through comprehensive penetration testing. So this is where we hire ethical hackers to try to expose and break into your Toad application. And it's because you never know, we might have missed something during our development processes, but we do have penetration testing from a third-party vendor, and they try to see if there's anything that they can do to get into your data. And so that's a really good way of testing how secure your software is. Toad also goes through SAST and DAST, which is static and dynamic application security testing. That's where we review the source code and see if there's anything in the source code that can be hijacked. And then we also review the application itself while it's running to see if there's anything that can be broken or broken into. So we do all kinds of testing to make sure that the software is secure. And we do this at the development lifecycle, right? So we're doing this ongoing. So even before you download it, it's already being scanned for everything possible, right? So our developers go through security training. Our development processes have these security features in place. Every time our product uses a third-party library, for example, we use a lot of Microsoft source code inside of Toad itself as well. We also go through and make sure that all that is secure as well. So every plugin, every widget, every little thing that we might have used from somewhere else, those are also inventoried, tracked, and checked on a regular basis for any security violations or security concerns, right? And all the data that goes that's saved inside of Toad, like for example, your saved passwords and things like that, that's all encrypted according to FIPS 1040, which is the standard for federal processing standards. And so your keys and your passwords are all encrypted with the same standards that are designed for federal systems. So the bottom line, all these things, we make sure that your Toad is not just giving you new features in every release, we're also giving you peace of mind that the software has been vetted by not just us, but third-party, white hat hackers and in the federal government, just to make sure that this software is as secure as possible. And I wanted to point out a couple things here because I have seen people run Toad 13 or even older than Toad for Oracle version 13. And I want to give you two real-world examples where issues were discovered and fixed immediately, right? So in Toad version 13.1, there was a vulnerability found in a third-party component. It was inside the Microsoft Visual C++ library. A lot of products use the C++ library, right? And so this was something that affected a lot of people. But of course, Microsoft does the responsible thing and discloses it. And because we know that we are using that library, we were able to react immediately, patch that issue out, and release the patch without any delays, right? So that makes sure that even though this was not our code, we're using code from Microsoft, and we make sure that that is also secure, and we make sure that our product is secure. So if you're using anything older than 13.1, you are exposing yourself to this particular security issue, right? So make sure you're not on something as old as 13.1. That's like 10 years old, and I do run into quite a few people who are still running Toad 13 and older. And for 13.3 here, this is just an example of our own penetration testing, right? And so again, we hire some ethical hackers to see if they can kind of break into the system or fool our teams and things like that. And one of the things they found was, well, you know how like in the web browser, when you go to like your bank, there's a little lock icon on the browser to help you understand it. Yeah, you have a secured connection to your bank and that the data that's being transmitted to your bank is secure. Well, they noticed that inside of Toad, we didn't have that little lock icon. So you didn't know if you're connecting to your database or you're connected to somewhere else, or there's somebody in the middle intercepting your communications, right? So by the advice of these ethical hackers, they told us, hey, you should put a little lock symbol in there. And we did that. We put a little lock symbol for when you make SSH connections to a database. And that's, again, just an ability for us to make sure that we are following all the standards that you would expect, right? So now when you connect to an environment, you know that it's a secure connection if you see that little lock icon, right? Those are just some takeaways here. And again, these protections only work if you're running the latest and greatest version of Toad. Okay, so I didn't want this whole presentation to be doom and gloom about getting hacked and things like that. So obviously there's some fun stuff in updating your Toad as well. And I'm just going to highlight a few features that have been added in the last few years that, especially around security, because since that's sort of the theme of today. And one of the things that we've added is UTP SQL unit testing. It's a very popular framework for designing and testing your database code, but it can be a bit of a chore to do. So in the newer versions of Toad, we have tools inside the Toad UI to help you build out these test cases, run these test cases, and report on these test cases, right? And having well-tested code is another way that Toad ensures the security and efficiencies of your database. So overall, having this makes your database more secure, and that's what we're all about here. Another new security feature in the newer versions of Toad is sensitive data awareness, right? Everyone is concerned nowadays about data privacy, and maybe you have some customers or users in Europe and you have to follow GDPR guidelines, or if you have users or customers in California, we've got CCPA to make sure that you are handling your people's personal data correctly. So as you work inside of Toad and you look at data, it will highlight in orange color if you're looking at or working with any sensitive data. And there's a built-in dictionary inside of Toad that helps you find or correct or hide or obfuscate any of the sensitive data in your environment, so you don't accidentally expose data to a wider audience. So that's just another way that we're helping you make sure that your data is secure. Again, more fun stuff here. Toad has always been very customizable, but with the introduction of themes, you can take it even further, right? A lot of people might be working late at night, maybe dim settings, and they wanted a dark mode. And so Toad has not just one dark mode, but several different dark modes to choose from. So you can go into the options and change the theme of Toad. So if you want a dark mode, there are several different options you can choose from. And there's also some fun themes as well, some seasonal themes. There's like a Valentine's Day theme, there's a Christmas theme, and things like that too. So, go in there and explore the options and change it up. It also helps kind of keep things fresh and new. But for practical purposes, it is really good for your eyes to not look at a bright white screen all the time. So you definitely do want to at least maybe take a look and see if you prefer using the dark mode. All right, and then one big one that was just recently released, AI Explain. So we have AI capabilities in Toad for Oracle now in the newest release. And this is the first of many upcoming AI integrated features. So what AI Explain does is if you have some code loaded up inside of Toad and you don't know what it does, or there's no good documentation on it, what you could do is ask Toad, hey, can you explain this code to me in plain English? Like, I don't know what it does. Maybe I'm not a developer. Maybe I'm more of a DBA and I don't write a lot of code. Can you just analyze this code and tell me what it does? So it just looks at your code and it reviews it and it gives you a summary in plain English. It'll tell you, what are the parameters, what does it do, what does it have access to, and things like that. And that saves you a ton of time. Our research shows that AI tools like AI Explain can make you at least 24% more productive, or at least more efficient, right? So 24% more efficiency when you're using these AI tools. So if you have 4 developers and they have AI tools, that's like having 5 developers now, right? So some huge savings in productivity and maybe even cost for your organization. Okay, so hopefully I gave you some reasons why you want to upgrade or update your Toad. But there are some myths out there, right? And I just want to take a moment here to talk about some of those myths and concerns, right? So the first myth I want to dispel is it's working fine, so why do I need to bother to update? Well, yeah, it works, and Toad is really good about working and being stable and being forward compatible. But just because something works doesn't really mean that it's secure, right? I mean, you can drive in a car with bald tires, and yeah, it works. It's going to get you from point A to point B, but do you really want to drive in something that could potentially blow out at any moment and cause an accident? Not really, right? So yeah, it's working, but forward compatibility is great, but it doesn't mean you're not protected, right? So just make sure to understand that capability, being able to do something, is not the same as being secure, right? So the next one is something that sometimes I hear, not always, but I do hear, hey, updates are hard. Well, yeah, some updates for some software can be hard. And nobody wants to kind of break their workflow, especially you're in the middle of something, but you don't have to update that moment. You can update later in the day or early next morning or whatever the case might be. And Toad is a desktop application, so updates are really fast. It's almost no downtime. I mean, you do have to restart your Toad, but that's about it. Restart your Toad, run the installer, and then start up your Toad, and it should bring in all your settings, which in a moment I'll show you that process, and hopefully I can show you how easy it is to update your Toad. And even better, if you have one of the newer Toad subscription licenses, you get auto update notifications. You'll get a message when you launch Toad saying, hey, there's a new version. Do you want to go ahead and restart your Toad to install the new version? You just hit yes, and it just does everything automatically. You don't have to download anything. You don't have to check what versions you're on. It just does that for you automatically. So if you're on the subscription versions, you can turn on auto updates, and Toad will just check for updates and download the update. And then when you're ready, you just restart your Toad and you have the new version. The last myth I want to talk about is security is someone else's job. Like, I'm not in security, I'm not in IT, so why does it matter? But again, that's a very dangerous myth, right? In today's world, any one person, any one device can be the entry point for a hacker to access the data in your environment or even your network environment. So security is a team sport. Be a good team member, make sure your tools are updated. And again, not just Toad, but your Windows operating system is updated, everything else that you might be running on your machine is updated, because you don't want to expose yourself. You don't want to be the weakest link in your environment and potentially be the one that causes potentially millions of dollars in damages or reputational issues or things like that. So, security is everyone's job nowadays. Okay, so we're going to go through some examples next. And before we do that, I wanted to have a slide here just to go over some quick tips about the upgrade process. First off, of course, make sure you download Toad from legitimate websites. So if you're trying to download officially from Quest, it's support.quest.com. But more likely than not, you might have someone in IT or you might have a software center who does the downloads for you. So obviously, just don't grab Toad from some random site. Make sure you're going through the proper channels for your organization. Or if you have a software center, make sure you're downloading and installing the prepackaged versions of Toad. One thing I also want to mention is that the default installation of Toad will install new versions into its own directory. So you can keep your old version of Toad, just shut it down, install the new version. The new version will be installed into a new directory, and you can have both versions running side by side. So, install the new version, use it, and once you feel comfortable with it, you can then go ahead and uninstall your old version. Now, again, sometimes maybe your IT organization doesn't let you do that, but if you have control over installing things on your computer, you can run an old version of Toad at the same time as the new version, and you can even run them side by side just to kind of compare and contrast. And then when you're comfortable, you can then just uninstall your old version of Toad. So that's what I also recommend. Use the new one until you're comfortable, which shouldn't take too long. The UI doesn't change that much, so you can adjust to the new version pretty quickly. And lastly, it's a good idea just to back up your settings. Even if you're not going to be updating and upgrading, just backing up your settings in case your computer crashes or you need to move to a new laptop or something like that. I'm going to show you how to do that in our demo of backing up your settings before running an installation or upgrading your Toad. All right, I think that's my last slide here. And yeah, I think with that, we'll go ahead and start upgrading a installation of Toad. All right, so just give me a moment here. I'm going to switch out of this screen. All right, so now I'm inside of my virtual machine here where I've got many different versions of Toad installed. So let me go ahead and open up this Toad for Oracle directory. And you see I've got 17, 16, and so on. Like I said earlier, you can have multiple Toad installations on the same machine. Before I upgrade my Toad, let's take a look at some of the things that you might want to capture prior to the update, right? So I'm going to double click on my 17.1 64-bit, and that's the first thing you might want to note. What bit-wise, what version of Toad are you running? 64-bit or 32-bit? Most people should be on 64-bit now, but occasionally you do see some folks still running a 32-bit version. The other thing to note, just really quick, what version you might be on and what edition. And if you didn't catch that there on the splash screen, don't worry about that. So you can see here that even when I just launch an older version of Toad, I'm going to be prompted if I want to do any updates as well. And if you've done this before, again, the process is super easy. You can just click on the update button here. It'll take you right to the support site. It'll take you right to the download page, and you just download the newer version, right? So if you've done this before, all you had to do is click one button to do it again the next time. But let's say you've never done this before. I'm going to hide this window and go back into Toad. So if I'm running an older version of Toad, what do I need to know before I upgrade to the new version? So let me close out a connection screen. Let's go up to the menu Help, and then down into the About page, right? So there's a couple things we want to take a note here. Just some of it just for your knowledge, but what bit version you're running, right? So I'm 64-bit. If you happen to be 32-bit, then maybe you want to download and install the 32-bit version. What edition you might have. This isn't really important because Toad will find your old keys and use it appropriately. But if you wanted to know what edition you had, you can see that here, Toad for Oracle. I'm running the DBA edition. And any add-ons you might have, just to note, again, you can also just copy this to the clipboard and just save it to a file if you wanted to. But one thing that is really important is if you want to go into the licensing tab here, you might want to take notice of your license number on the screen. Because if you want to register yourself for support, you're going to need this license number right here. So write that down, keep a copy of that. You can also get to the screen by going to the menu Help, and then going down to licensing instead, right? And it'll take you to that same screen and note your license number. All right, so the next thing after you get that information is just out of good best practice is to back up your settings inside of Toad. And you can do that really easily. Go up to the menu Utilities, down to Manage User Settings. So if you select Manage User Settings, you're gonna get to this dialog, which is really awesome. Not a lot of people know about this. You can back up your settings, you can import old settings, you can refresh to default settings using this menu here. This menu has evolved a lot over the years, so if you're running a really old version of Toad, it might look a little different. It might not have all these features and functions available, but the idea is that your Toad settings are stored in this directory: C drive, user, your username, app data, roaming, Quest software, Toad for Oracle, and then the version number. So if you want to just go into that directory and just copy it using a utility, just like a Windows Explorer, you can do that if you wanted to. But this utility just makes it a little bit easier. So I can say, yeah, I want to go ahead and back up or export all of my Toad settings. So I can just go ahead and down here to the second section and select Export, right? And it's going to create this export zip file. It says the version number that you're on and then today's date. I'm going to actually put this into a different directory. Let's go ahead and put this on my desktop and go ahead and click on Save. Right? So I'm going to back up my settings just in case something happens to go wrong, or again, maybe I moved to a new machine and I want to be able to import my settings over to my new machine instead. Again, just some really cool things that you can do in here. If for some reason your Toad is acting really weird and you want to go back to default settings, you can use this utility here and say, hey, reset everything back to a clean slate, or maybe just reset everything but keep my connections, or keep just my SQL recall history, or whatever the case might be. So you can definitely manage your settings and back up your settings using here. It also, in the newer versions of Toad, automatically does backups too. So if you didn't happen to go in here, it does save a backup in that same folder every 30 days or so. Or actually, it backs up every day and it keeps those backups for 30 days. That's what I should say. So what I'm just doing here is just I did a manual backup of it just so I know I have it, and maybe I put it somewhere else. Maybe I copy it to a network drive or just have it somewhere else available to me. Okay, so I'm pretty much done here in my old version of Toad. I know the version number I'm on. I know my license number, and I have a backup of my settings. So let's go ahead and start getting a new version. So I'm going to close out of Toad 17, and I'm going to open up a web browser. Let's kind of start from fresh. Let's open up a brand new web browser, and let's go to support.quest.com. This is our official support site to go and download new versions, as well as do things like look at the knowledge base, look at the release notes. What is in that new version before I download it and install it, right? So if you haven't been to support before, you'll probably want to register for an account. That will give you full access to the site, be able to let you download software, be able to even open up support tickets and things like that. So up here on the upper right-hand side, there's the little user icon. If you click on that, if you have an account, you can click on sign in. If you don't have an account, you can click on create support account. And this is where that previous license number that I showed you would be handy. So enter in your name, email, password, sign up. Then I think on the next screen, it'll ask you for your license number. You go ahead and put that in. Now you're officially registered for support. Okay. Once you're registered for support, you'll be logging back on here to support.quest.com. You can search for Toad for Oracle. So I'll just type in Toad for Oracle. And then I can select what Toad for Oracle I have, if it's Toad for Oracle Windows, or if it's Toad for Oracle Mac or subscription and things like that. I'm going to select Toad for Oracle. And then I believe I need to, nope, it will just automatically take me to the product support page for Toad for Oracle. So you can see all the great information available here on support. The latest version, just really quick, is 2025 R1 at the time of this training here. So I scroll down, I can see the most common questions and knowledge base or things that have been coming up. What is the difference between Toad 64-bit and 32-bit? Well, the secret is if you're running a 32-bit Oracle client, you need to run Toad for Oracle 32-bit. If you're running a 64-bit version of the Oracle client, you should be running Toad for Oracle 64-bit. That gives you access to more of your computer's RAM. You can have more memory, more data on your screen at one time if you run the 64-bit version. So most people should be on 64-bit. I do occasionally still see people running 32-bit. But the important part here is on the right-hand side, underneath download software, you can see all the different installers that we have available. I'm going to go to see all downloads because I think this is a little bit organized, a little bit better here. And you can see here there is a web installer and a full installer and an MSI installer. And there's 32-bit and 64-bit versions of each one. So the web installer just downloads a tiny installer. And then when you go through the installation process, it'll download more stuff after the fact. So it's a quick download, and then it'll just then download only the things you need to install. Versus the full installer downloads everything. It downloads Toad, it downloads all the ancillary products like the SQL Optimizer, Spotlight, Benchmark Factory. Whether or not you have licenses for them, it will download them anyways. They'll download the installer for them anyways. So really, the benefit of the full is, let's say you need to copy that installer to a computer that doesn't have internet capabilities. So then you do want to have all the installers ready to go. But for most people, you can go with the web installer. It just downloads the stub, you run the stub looks at your key and says, okay, you're allowed to download these products. We'll go ahead and download them for you. So in my case, I'm going to select web installer 64. MSI is really if you are part of IT or help desk team and you need to package this Toad to be installed on other people's machines for them. So if you're again, help desk and you need to create an installation package, an automated installation package that automatically installs it, puts in the keys, brings in settings and things like that, that's when you might want to download and install the MSI version. So if you're in IT, maybe that's what you want. But again, for most folks who install software on their own computer, they're going to want to use the 64-bit web installer. So I'll click on the download icon here and I'll sign in. I'm going to sign in with my actual Quest account. All right. And then it will verify that I am licensed for downloading this software. I agree to the licensing agreement, click on continue. And then you do have to scroll down here it's just asking you, do you want to download some other stuff with the installer? Do you want to download the getting started guide or the installation guide? I don't really need that right now. You can include them in your download if you want, but I'm just going to say download now. Just download the installer, download it right now. And then you can see it's downloaded. And it just downloaded the stub. So it's only a 50 megabyte download because I didn't download all the installation files. I just downloaded the little stub that I can start out with. Let's go into that directory and let's run that installer I downloaded. So I'll just double click on it and the installer will start. So let me hide a couple of these. Oh, let's just leave it. So the installer will start. And so I get the welcome screen. You can read through that if you'd like, but I'll click on next, agree to the licensing, click on next. So the installer will look on your machine to see what keys you have already installed. And so for me, it already found my existing keys. So again, I don't have to enter any keys here. But if you needed to modify that, you can click on add license. Or if you ran the installer on a new machine, you might want to click on add license and you put in that license number that we've talked about previously. I've got a few different licenses available to me. I'm just going to use my first one here. Click on next. So if there's a product already installed, you'll see it says installed. But if you don't have it installed, you have the status, hey, I want to go ahead and install this version of Toad. And so depending on what keys you have, things will be lit up or faded out. So again, because I only have a Toad license, then maybe it just downloads this. But if I had other licenses, it'll go ahead and download Spotlight, Optimizer, and so on. So it really depends on what license key you're using. And that's how Toad knows what it needs to download and what it needs to install. So in this example, I'm just going to install Toad 2025 R1. That's the newest version there. And click on next. I'll use the default directories. Again, every new major version will have its own separate directory, so you can have multiple installs. You'll notice I still have my Toad 17 installed. I'll go ahead and click on next. And just the prerequisites, yep, you've got enough space, good to go. Click on install. And then yes, because it's going to download some more stuff to install on your machine. Click on yes, and it goes ahead and does that, right? So it downloads the actual Toad installer, and it will unpackage it and then run it and install it for me. All right, and that's all it was. The installation is finished. I'll go ahead and click on finish. And if I go to my desktop, I'll have the icon for Toad 2025 R1 Release 1. I'll double click on that. Toad will automatically pull in any user files or user data that you might have from previous installations, and it will go ahead and use that. So when I run my Toad here, it should have all my connections and settings from my previous installation. And if it doesn't, again, you can go into that manage user settings and you can import your settings, right? So it has all my connections and passwords. That's all there is to it. I'll go ahead and close here. If it didn't happen to pull in any information, I can go back to my utilities, go to the manage user settings. I can say import, and I can import from the file that I created earlier on my desktop, or what was it, my documents folder. Wherever I saved it, I can import that back in. So I can also go here. Let's say I had multiple installations of Toad. I can browse and see, well, of my old installations, do I want to restore data from my 17.0, 17.1, or back to 16.0, and so on. So you can also use this as a way to browse maybe other settings that you might not have backed up, but still are lingering on your machine, right? So you can copy from previous installations. You can import from one of your backups, or, new version of Toad, maybe you want to start fresh, you can do that as well. All right, and that's it. I just upgraded my version of Toad from 17.1 to the 2025 Release 1. So we're going to have a QA session in just a moment, but I do want to note that there are future sessions of the Toad Skills 101 courses planned. Episode 4 is coming up next, and this is going to be talking about mastering your Oracle database connections, hosted by Albert Rodriguez. With that said, we'll go ahead and go over to our Q&A, and let's look out for any questions you might have.